Hey guys, tonight we're wandering into an ancient Greek kitchen, well more like an eternal fireplace, and discovering how Hestia's humble hearth became the heart of a whole city. Picture the flickering glow of that sacred flame, its embers dancing in the dark while you lean in, drawn by its warmth and mystery. You probably won't survive a week trying to start your morning coffee with divine sparks, but stick around, you'll learn why the Greeks built an entire town around her fire. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. So, drop your location and local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into the realm of Hestia, the unassuming Olympian goddess whose domain wasn't thunderbolts or the seas, but something far more essential, the hearth. In every early Greek home, the hearth fire was the center of family life, cooking warmth, and the untold stories of generations were passed from ember to ember. Hestia, oldest sister of Zeus, held this flame as an eternal pledge. Once it burned, it should never be extinguished. Historians still argue whether her veneration began in Mycenaean palaces or grassroots village homes, but by the time of Homer, her presence was woven into every household ritual. In those early days, each city maintained a priestess of the hearth, akin to Rome's Vestal virgins, who tended Hestia's communal flame without pause. The mainstream fact, Hestia was worshipped more quietly than other deities, yet no public sacrifice could begin until her fire was kindled. Fringe mythology even hints that her smoke could carry secret messages. Think ancient Wi-Fi. Though scholars debate whether any cult actually believed their letters rode on curling smoke signals. So tonight, as you settle in, imagine standing before that crackling hearth in ancient Hestia, the obscure hillside town said to be founded when a wandering hero received the goddess's spark. You can almost feel the heat on your cheeks and smell the wood smoke drifting into the twilight air. This is where our story begins, not with a battle or a thunderous decree, but with the simple, steady glow of a fireplace that would one day give name to a city. You step closer to the hearth's edge, feeling the warmth seep into your fingertips as the embers glow bright orange. Tonight, you're not just a passive observer. You're standing beside Hestia herself as her fire is born. In the earliest days of Greek myth, before cities rose from clay and marble, there was a legendary contest between Poseidon and Apollo to claim patronage of what would become Athens. We're all familiar with that mainstream fact. Poseidon struck the ground with his trident and produced a saltwater spring, while Apollo offered the first olive tree. Historians still argue whether the olive truly sprouted or if local farmers simply planted it later to honor him. Either way, when the people chose Apollo's gift, Poseidon stormed off, leaving his anger to smolder. But here's where Hestia's eternal flame comes in our fringe tidbit for tonight. Some ancient storytellers whispered that in his fury, Poseidon's salt water seeped into the soil around that newly planted olive, turning it into a firewood olive that, when split, sparked with a supernatural glow. The locals, terrified and intrigued, brought the glowing embers to Hestia's care. She tended them, coaxing them into a stable, sacred flame that would never die. This tale may or may not be literal. Many scholars scoff at the idea of salt-infused sparks. Yet the symbolic link between sea soil and flame captures the imagination in a way that dry facts cannot. Imagine being one of the first townspeople to witness that miracle. The night sky is vast and cold, but you clutch a piece of that firewood olive, its grain crackling under your palm. You strike it, just a gentle tap, and suddenly a tiny spark leaps out, growing into a flame that warms your cheek. You and your neighbors gasp, sharing wide-eyed glances as the air fills with the scent of olive and smoke, a scent that centuries later will still draw pilgrims to Hestia, the city that bears Hestia's name. In those early years, before temples of marble and columns of gold, Hestia's flame was tended by priestesses who watched over it day and night. They were the unspoken heroines of Greek religion, the first Vestal keepers, though their order was uniquely Greek, not Roman. Their duty was simple yet profound. Never let the flame die. Every morning, a fresh branch of sacred wood was placed on the fire. Every evening, the embers were banked with ash, so the hearth would awaken anew. It was a ritual that bound the community together, linking every household's hearth fire to the city's communal flame. You probably wouldn't survive a week trying to keep a fire stoked in a damp basement. Modern life isn't designed for it, but these priestesses perfected the art. They learned to read the grain of the olive wood, knowing exactly which branch would burn brightest without smoke. Some fringe myths claim they even mixed in herbs thyme for clarity, oregano for protection, though historians still argue whether any of these plants were ever used, or if that's simply a later invention to romanticize their role. Regardless, the smell of those herbs burning alongside the olive embers must have been unforgettable. In your mind's eye, you can see the modest lodge where the first flame was housed. There's no grand temple yet, just a roughly hewn stone hearth set against a wall of twigs and olive branches. Outside, the townspeople gather nightly, bearing small clay lamps borrowed from their homes. Each lamp's little flame is lit from Hestia's central fire, ensuring that every family's hearth burns with the same divine spark. It's a powerful image of unity, the city's life force, literally shared torch to torch, hearth to hearth. As the legend goes, this ritual of first fire ceremonies continued for generations until Hestia's flame was enshrined in a proper temple. The construction of that temple marked a turning point, a shift from humble communal hearth to organized institutional worship. The temple's central hearth was so revered that no chariot's wheels could pass through its sacred precinct. It was a zone of peace and hospitality. Some fringe sources even suggest that petitions to Hestia were written on thin strips of linen and placed into the hearth's ashes, the idea being that the smoke would carry prayers directly to the gods. Historians still argue whether any inscriptions have ever been found or if this is poetic flourish, but the notion speaks to the deep trust the ancients placed in that eternal flame. You, the modern listener, can almost feel the weight of that history pressing down like the heat from the fire's core. There's a timeless appeal to a flame that never dies, an enduring symbol that outlasts kings, wars, and empires. While Alexander the Great and his successors may get all the headlines, it's that steady, unassuming fire that quietly held the city's heart. It was Hestia's gift, not thunderbolts or earthquakes, but the simple, sustaining warmth of home. Tonight, as you lean back and let the image of that smoky temple fade, carry with you the lesson of the first sacred flame, that the most powerful miracles often arise from the humblest actions. A single spark, nurtured with patience and care, can light up the world. One hearth, one home, one community at a time. And isn't that a comforting thought as you drift toward sleep? You step into the temple's inner sanctum at first light, the air thick with the scent of burning olive and a faint undercurrent of time. Before you laid out on the smooth stone hearth glows Hestia's eternal flame, her divine ember that has flickered without fail since the age of heroes. As one of Hestia's priestesses, your sacred duty is clear: to tend this immortal fire, ensuring its continuity until the end of days. This task is as simple as it is profound. Feed the flame, shield it from wind and rain, and never, under any circumstance, allow even a single spark to die. Your tunic, woven from fine white linen, brushes the ground as you move. You carry a bundle of carefully selected olive branches, hand-pruned the previous day, for their even grain and minimal smoke. Each branch was chosen with care too fresh, and it smolders; too dry, and it burns too fiercely. The ideal wood yields a steady, clean flame. No crackles, no harsh, acrid smoke, just pure, warm light. Historians still argue whether the ancients understood this as empirical woodcraft or as divine guidance, but every priestess learns the sacred art of wood selection from her predecessor. You kneel before the hearth and lay the smallest branch across the glowing coals, your movements practiced and precise. As the branch ignites, you lean forward, cupping your hands to cradle the heat, murmuring a quiet invocation to Hestia, keeper of the hearth, mother of flame. Guard this fire for your people. This prayer, spoken in a hushed, reverent tone, forms part of the unbroken chain of ritual that binds each generation of priestesses to the goddess's service. Fringe lore suggests that the exact intonation of the incantation can sway the flame's brightness, but devout scholars still debate whether any variation truly affects the fire, or if it's simply a powerful placebo for the pious. Next, you take up a small bellows, crafted from goat hide, its leather, aged by decades of use. You gently inflate it, drawing air into its chamber, then direct a steady stream of oxygen toward the base of the hearth. The coals flare to life, humming with renewed vigor. The flame leaps higher, casting dancing shadows on the carved stone walls, adorned with reliefs of Hestia's symbols, flame motifs entwined with hearth tiles, and garlands of olive leaves. These images, though weathered, remain crisp reminders of the goddess's enduring presence. You probably wouldn't survive a single day wielding those bellows without feeling dizzy from the heat and haze, but years of training have conditioned you to this environment. Around you, the temple's architecture reflects the centrality of the hearth. 4 massive Doric columns support a domed roof, punctuated by an oculus, allowing sunlight to spotlight the fire at midday and moonlight to halo it at night. The ancient engineers designed this space so that wind currents flow beneath the floor and up through vents hidden in the walls, channeling fresh air to the hearth while whisking away excess smoke. Historians still argue whether these features were accidental byproducts of construction or the result of a sophisticated understanding of airflow. Either way, the effect is undeniable. The flame breathes as though alive. Having stoked the fire, you move to the adjacent alcove, where a shallow pool of water glistens in carved stone. This isn't ordinary water. It's drawn from a sacred spring, said to bubble forth at the touch of a hero's foot. You dip a slender branch of laurel into the pool and touch it to the fire, creating a brief shower of sparks that rattle like musical notes. This act symbolizes the balance between elements, water's purity feeding fire's life. Many scholars suggest the ritual evolved from ancient purification ceremonies, yet others insist it's a poetic addition by later priests to underscore Hestia's role as a mediator between opposing forces. Either way, the sparks are mesmerizing, and you watch them dissolve into smoke, whispering another prayer of thanks. Your next task is to inspect the hearth's ash bank. Over centuries, a compact mound of ash has accumulated at one side of the hearth, tended and trimmed by countless priestesses. You use a flat spatula of bronze to gently scrape off the excess, ensuring a clean bed for fresh embers. This ash is sacred, believed to contain the essence of every prayer offered before Hestia's flame. Some fringe accounts even claim that powdered ash mixed with olive oil served as a healing salve for wounds. But mainstream historians dismiss this as embellishment. Nevertheless, you handle the ash with care, mindful of its symbolic weight. Once the hearth is trimmed, you reach for a clay lamp filled with olive oil, lit from the sacred flame, and used to light smaller household hearths throughout Hestia. You carry it in a shallow bronze dish, stepping carefully through the temple's outer chamber, where novice priestesses stand in silent formation. Each holds an unlit lamp, their faces illuminated by anticipation. One by one, they approach you, and you pass the flame from your lamp to theirs. You watch as the wick ignites the tiny flame, dancing before being covered by the lamp's shade to burn steadily. This transfer is a solemn moment, a visible link between the communal hearth and every home in the city. A single misstep here, allowing a lamp to flicker or die, would be seen as an omen of misfortune, and so every priestess moves with deliberate grace. By midday, the temple is humming with quiet energy. Pilgrims from neighboring towns arrive to witness the flame tending, bringing offerings of fresh wood grains and occasionally exotic herbs, rosemary for remembrance, bay leaves for protection, even saffron for its gilded hue. You accept these gifts at the temple threshold, offering silent blessings before adding them to the temple's storeroom. From there, you'll choose the finest specimens for tomorrow's rituals. Fringe stories claim that certain herbs, when burnt, created visions of the goddess herself, but respected scholars still argue whether any credible witness ever recorded such an event. As afternoon shadows stretch, you oversee a second tending ceremony, known as the Hours of Gold, so named for the brief window when sunlight streams through the oculus, striking the hearth in a perfect beam. You instruct the novices to build a miniature fire replica beside the main hearth, symbolizing the cycles of day and night. As both fires blaze, you lead a chant, from spark to blaze, from day to night, Hestia's light, our guiding light. This chant, though simple, binds the community's daily rhythm to the goddess's eternal flame. You feel a profound hum within you as your voice joins theirs, the sound vibrating through the temple's stones. Before dusk falls, you perform the final chore, banking the fire. You gently pile ash and embers over the coals, leaving just enough oxygen for a slow embers-only burn. This ensures that when dawn comes, all you and your successor need to do is uncover the embers, and the flame will roar back to life. As you tamp down the ashes, you murmur a final prayer. Guard these embers, keep them warm. Bring again the ancient spark. The hush that follows feels holy, as though the temple itself is breathing in anticipation of tomorrow's renewal. Your duty complete, you step back and gaze at the banked hearth. Though the flames are hidden, you know the fire endures its life, safeguarded until morning. You exit into the cool evening air, leaving the temple's interior to glow softly with the promise of dawn. Outside, citizens light their household lamps from the temple's shared flame, their steps lit by small pools of fire moving through the streets. The city pulses with life, bound together by Hestia's fire, each home part of a greater whole. As you return to the temple's vestibule, you feel the weight of centuries in your heart. The countless priestesses who came before you, the untold prayers spoken beside this fire, the unwavering dedication that kept the flame alive through wars, plagues, and fading empires. You are one link in an eternal chain, entrusted with a spark that defies time itself. And tomorrow at dawn, you will kneel once more before Hestia's hearth, repeating these rituals in an unbroken cycle of tending and renewal. In this simple, repetitive act lies the power of continuity, unity, and home qualities that resonate far beyond the temple's walls. You probably won't survive on coffee alone, but a single morning attending Hestia's flame, you'd understand how a small spark can become the heart of a city and the soul of a people. You step beyond the temple's threshold and onto the bustling streets of Hestia, still warm with the glow of newly lit lamps. Here, the influence of Hestia's hearth extends far beyond the temple walls, into every home, every family, every corner of civic life. In ancient Greece, the hearth was more than a place to cook or gather. It was the symbolic and literal center of existence. Without a hearth fire, a household was considered spiritually dead. No light, no warmth, no protection. Hestia's guardianship of the sacred flame in the temple mirrored her guardianship over each individual home hearth across the city. As you walk through narrow lanes paved with worn stone, you see clay hearths embedded in the center of courtyard floors, each ringed by low stone benches. Families kneel beside them at dawn and dusk, offering libations of oil or wine, murmuring the same prayers you heard in the temple. Hestia, keep our flame bright. Guard our home tonight. This shared liturgy binds citizens together. No matter how far-flung their homes, they all draw spiritual sustenance from the same divine fire. Historians still argue whether this household veneration rose organically from folk traditions or was a top-down decree by civic authorities, but the result was undeniable unity. In every home, the hearth's fire is tended with meticulous care. Grandmothers pass down secret methods for starting logs without smoke. Fathers teach their children how to maintain steady embers that do not flicker in the wind. In wealthier homes, braziers, hung from iron chains, allow cooks to slide pots closer or further from the heat, controlling the flame's strength. But regardless of social station, each family views the hearth as their personal altar. On festival days such as the Panathenea or the Thesmophoria, the city's hearth, Hestia's temple fire is paraded through the streets in brazen lamps, rekindling every household's flame in a grand ceremony of communal renewal. Beyond domestic use, the hearth also plays a central role in civic and legal affairs. Oaths sworn by fire carry special weight. No offender would dare perjure himself before Hestia's glowing embers. When new public buildings are dedicated, their inaugural fires are sparked from the temple's hearth, stamping them with divine approval. Even the city's magistrates begin their sessions by placing their hands above a small brazier, feeling its warmth as they swear to uphold justice. Fringe records tell of criminals who, upon touching the sacred flame, confessed their crimes in tears. Historians still debate whether these accounts are sincere testimonies or embellished, moralizing tales. In the marketplace, vendors arrange their stalls around portable hearths, cooking food on demand. The scent of roasting lamb and freshly baked bread mingles in the air, drawing both locals and travelers. No tavern sits empty for long, for patrons gather around communal hearths to share stories, trade news, and forge alliances. The flame encourages conversation and generosity. Hestia's subtle influence encouraging each person to open both their hearth and their heart. The significance of the hearth in Greek life also extends to familial rites of passage. At a newborn's naming ceremony, midwives place the infant's cradle beside the hearth, allowing the child's first breaths to mingle with the hearth smoke, symbolically welcoming them into the warmth of community. At weddings, brides weave a ribbon around the household hearth 3 times before lighting the matrimonial fire, invoking Hestia's blessing for a harmonious union. And at funerals, remains of the deceased are laid by the hearth for one last farewell, the smoke believed to carry the soul's prayers upward. Yet the omnipresence of the hearth is not without its risks. Accidental fires plague the wooden roofs and reed walls of Hestia. Fire breaks narrow stone alleys are built to prevent blazes from spreading. Yet every few decades a great fire consumes a quarter of the city before being quelled. In these moments of crisis, the people turn to Hestia's temple, carrying buckets of sacred water and offering urgent prayers as they form human chains to douse the flames. When the hearth's embers survive, they are heralded as signs of divine favor. When they falter, citizens interpret it as a call to deeper piety and communal reform. Through all these facets, domestic rituals, civic ceremonies, market life, and crises, the sacred hearth unites the people of Hestia. It transforms a simple fire into an emblem of home justice, hospitality, and survival. No other deity carries this intimate influence. While Zeus rules from Olympus and Athena watches over wisdom, it is Hestia's gentle flame that truly lives within the pulse of every household and the heart of the city itself. You step off the main thoroughfare into a quieter district where the scent of spiced honey and roasting goat drifts from small alleys lined with modest workshops. Here, the influence of Hestia's flame takes on a more practical hue. Daily life, commerce, and artisan craft all orbit around the hearth. In these winding lanes, every craftsman from potter to blacksmith relies on a hearth fire carved into the floor of their shop or housed in a corner alcove. This isn't mere convenience. It's an extension of Hestia's domain, a mainstream fact recognized by every guild member. In Hestia, no work truly begins until the hearth's coals glow. As you enter a potter's workshop, you notice the master kneading clay by the light of a small hearth fire. The flame provides the perfect warmth to keep the clay pliable, preventing it from stiffening too quickly in the cool mountain air. You probably wouldn't survive a week trying to maintain clay at the ideal temperature without modern kilns. But the potter here snaps small bundles of oak kindling into the fire, adjusting the embers with an implements carved from olive wood. Fringe lore claims some potters whisper a short prayer to Hestia under their breath as they knead, believing her blessing infuses each piece with resilience. Historians still argue whether any surviving pottery shows signs of divine strength or if it's simply exceptional craftsmanship honed by practice. Beyond the potter's bench, the blacksmith's forge glows fierce and red, yet even there, Hestia's influence persists. Though most Greeks attribute metallurgy to Hephaestus, the blacksmiths of Hestia swear that their forges ignited from the temple hearth burn hotter and cleaner. At midday, the smith's apprentice sets a charcoal brazier beside the hearth, drawing embers from the temple's flame to ensure the iron glows white enough for fine tools. Scholars still debate whether the metalworkers genuinely noted a difference or if this was a clever marketing ploy by local artisans eager to claim divine provenance. Nonetheless, the effect is undeniable. Visitors admire the weapons and tools crafted here, calling them blessed by Hestia's steady hand. Artisans and merchants alike abide by a daily oyster of ritual each morning. Before striking a deal or firing a kiln, they light a small lamp at the hearth corner, whispering, "Hestia's light, guide my trade." This invocation serves dual-purpose prayer for prosperity and identification that every good in Hestia springs from the same communal source. Even the fishmongers, whose pungent stalls might otherwise seem far removed from the notion of a domestic hearth, carry small charcoal grills where fresh mackerel sizzle in olive oil, the smoky aroma drawing bidders in the market. They credit Hestia for the fire that cooks their catch and for the hospitality that greets every guest at their tables. In workshops along the river Toledo, where tanners cure hides by hearth fires, the process is as much spiritual as it is practical. The hides are soaked in vats by day, then laid by the hearth at night, where gentle heat dries and softens the leather. Tanners' Guild records, even fragmentary ones, mention communal renditions of the Hestia's Flame hymn, a quietly sung chant that some fringe sources claim helped ward off the noxious stench. Historians still argue whether chanting actually neutralized odors or if the ritual simply boosted the tanner's morale during long stench-filled nights. Either way, the practice underscores how universally the hearth served as center of both craft and community well-being. As noon approaches, you join a group of scribes gathering in a dimly lit library courtyard. Here, the hearth's embers feed a brazier that warms their scrolls, preventing brittleness in the parchments. The scribes dip reed pens into ink pots held warm by gentle embers. You marvel at the sight of dozens of scrolls laid in neat rows, their edges curling slightly in the heat. Fringe tales insist that copyists occasionally left secret symbols In the ash patterns, tiny messages meant for future generations, though mainstream scholars still argue that any such symbols are likely accidental, scorch marks given too much literary weight. Regardless, the scribes treat the hearth's maintenance as sacrosanct, believing that a steady flame equates to clarity of thought and accuracy of transcription. In the quiet moments between tasks, the artisans sit by the hearth to share stories, some filled with heroic feats, others with domestic humor. One potter recounts the time he accidentally dropped a fresh amphora into the fire, watching it transform into a molten cascade that scorched the workshop floor. Yet, no one laughed more heartily than the potter himself, praising Hestia for turning his blunder into a tale that would be retold for years. Historians still debate whether this anecdote comes from oral tradition or was invented later to illustrate the hearth's centrality to every aspect of life. Either way, it highlights how a shared flame fosters community bonds through laughter as much as through ritual. As dusk settles and the shops close, the craftsmen light their street lamps, small clay vessels, fueled by oil drawn from temple offerings, walking home beneath rows of lanterns, kindled from Hestia's eternal flame. The streets glow in a golden procession, a living display of unity. No lamppost stands unlit. No household fails to share in the city's light. Pilgrims traveling after dark speak of the river of fire pouring through Hestia's avenues, claiming it guides weary feet safely to open doors. Fringe accounts affirm that travelers caught in sudden storms or bandit ambushes were often led to safety by the glow of distant lamps, though historians still argue whether these tales reflect divine intervention or reliable civic planning. Finally, you return to your own hearth at home, where your family awaits. The hearth's fire has been banked gently with ash, ready to roar back to life at first light. You cross the threshold with reverence, kneeling to light your household's lamp from a burner you keep always near the hearth. As the flame catches, you hear children giggle and elders murmur the evening prayer. Hestia, guard this flame, guard this home. Tonight you'll sleep warm and safe, wrapped in the glow, born long ago on Delphi's slopes. In every craft, every trade, every moment, Hestia's hearth binds the city of Hestia together. From clay to metal, from ink to leather, from hearthside, laughter to lamps that guide travelers home. The sacred flame is not a relic of myth, but the beating heart of daily life. It reminds you that true prosperity arises not merely from skill or wealth, but from the warmth of shared devotion and the simple act of keeping the fire alive. You stand atop a gentle rise overlooking a windswept plateau, the olive trees thinning before you as if bowing to some unseen authority. This, according to legend, is where Hestia was born, where a humble traveler found himself guided by a flicker of divine light rather than a map. In the days when myth and reality intertwined, a hero named Thestios wandered these lands weary from battles in distant kingdoms and seeking only a place to rest. He carried nothing but a battered cloak and the memories of war, yet fate had other plans. As night fell, Thestios discovered a tree, hollowed by time and elements, much like the sacred oaks surrounding this plateau. He shielded himself from the chill wind beneath its ancient branches and struck flints to spark a fire for warmth. But no ordinary flame sprang forth. Its embers glowed a pale blue, untouched by mortal hands. Intrigued, he knelt before the fire, offering a silent prayer to any god who might listen. When Hestia, goddess of the hearth, heard his plea, she descended in the form of a soft breeze that carried the scent of olive blossoms. You probably wouldn't survive a week camping without modern gear, but Thestios found himself wrapped in the fire's warmth, as if the flame itself cradled him in protective arms. Mainstream tradition holds that Thestios, convinced of the deity's favor, marked the spot by carving Hestia's symbol, a simple flame, into the tree's bark. He vowed to establish a community where every heart burned with the same divine spark. Historians still argue whether this founding myth emerged before or after the city's actual settlement, but archaeological digs have uncovered early votive plaques bearing Thestios' name, suggesting at least some kernel of truth. By dawn, word of the miraculous flame had spread to nearby villages. A small band of families drawn by curiosity and hope arrived and shared in Thestios' fire. They brought offerings of grain and wine, sensing that something extraordinary had taken root. Legend says that Hestia's presence manifested in a circle of mushrooms that sprang up around the hearth overnight, an eerie, bioluminescent ring said to glow whenever a prayer was uttered. Fringe lore insists that these fungi were sacred Hestia's lanterns, guiding pilgrims through dark forests. Scholars still debate whether these mushrooms genuinely glowed or if storytellers later embellished the tale to underscore the goddess's guiding light. The growing community built their first temporary huts of wattle and daub, each with its own hearth, fueled by coals drawn from Hestia's flame. They called their settlement Hestia, home of the hearth, and consecrated the original hearth tree as the city's heart. Over the years, successive generations replaced the tree with a stone altar, but the memory of its wooden predecessor lingered in the people's hearts. As you wander through the modern city's ruins, you can still trace the outline of the original grove in the curving pattern of its streets, a silent testament to the founding hero's humble fire. But the legend of Thestios holds more than just a tale of divine intervention. It also carries a lesson in hospitality, a principle central to Hestia's domain. The hero, once a weary wanderer, extended his hearth to strangers without question. In gratitude, Hestia blessed the land with bountiful harvests and gentle winters, ensuring that no household's fire would die. Historians still argue whether the city's agricultural success was due to ingenious irrigation techniques borrowed from Minoan traders or directly credited to the goddess's favor, but ancient records praise Hestia for its fertile fields and mild climate qualities that set it apart from harsher neighboring territories. Through the founding legend, Thestios' story became intertwined with Hestia's essence, a reminder that true strength lies not in conquest or riches, but in the simple act of offering warmth and shelter. The city's earliest laws codified this philosophy, mandating that every home maintain at least one guest room and an ever-burning hearth. Chroniclers of the time noted that no beggar left Hestia's gates empty-handed. Even during famines, the city's communal granary was open to all. Fringe sources speak of a Hestian bread, baked only on founding anniversaries, said to grant a year's worth of good fortune to anyone who tasted it. Though mainstream scholars remain skeptical of any supernatural properties. As Hestia grew from a cluster of makeshift huts to a structured polis, the founding legend remained a cornerstone of civic identity. Annual processions reenacted Thestios' discovery, with a chosen hero of the hearth carrying a torch lit from the temple's eternal flame to ignite new fires in every household. This ceremony, still performed in miniature by descendants of the original settlers, serves as a living bridge between past and present, linking each generation to the humble hero and the goddess whose grace kindled their home. Walking through the remains of an ancient suburb, you pass a worn stone marker inscribed with Thestios' vow, "May every hearth burn bright and every heart be warm." It's a simple epitaph, but its resonance echoes across centuries. You feel the weight of countless hands that once tended these fires, the prayers offered in smoky kitchens, the shared laughter around communal tables. All of it springs from that one night when a weary traveler first struck sparks beneath a sacred tree. In the cool evening air, you might pause at a crumbling shrine where offerings of olive oil still glint in shallow bowls. Pilgrims here today lay down small pieces of bread and tiny lamps, hoping for a spark of inspiration or a touch of warmth in cold times. Fringe tales claim that if you leave your lamp burning through the night, you'll dream of your heart's truest desire. Yet skeptics suggest any visions are merely the mind's flickering reflections of the flame. In either case, the ritual endures, a testament to the enduring power of the founding legend. Finally, as night falls and you return to your own hearth, no matter how modest, you carry with you the essence of Thestios' vow. Every spark you kindle, every ember you tend, binds you to a shared heritage of hospitality, community, and resilience. The story of the city's founding reminds you that even the humblest acts of care, a warm fire, a kind word, an open door, can forge legacies that outlast empires and echo in the warmth of countless homes. You approach the temple hearth at dawn, just as the first tendrils of smoke begin to rise, curling like ethereal fingers toward the oculus above. Here, at Hestia's sacred fire, the ordinary transforms into the divine. Long ago, mainstream historians confirm this. The temple functioned not only as a place of worship, but also as an oracle. Pilgrims and citizens alike came to witness moments when the embers and smoke would reveal glimpses of the future, whispered by the goddess herself. Tonight you find yourself standing beside the high priestess Callista, whose mantle bears the embroidered flame emblem of Hestia. You probably wouldn't survive a single night of candle-lit consultations in a cramped stone chamber. But here, by this crackling fire, Callista moves with calm authority. She fans the embers gently, sending thin streams of smoke spiraling upward. The pilgrims gathered in the antechamber hush their eyes fixed on the dancing haze. Fringe lore suggests that Callista once read the fate of an entire army in the swirl of smoke, a prophecy so accurate that the battle ended before it began. But historians still argue whether that story sprang from genuine divine revelation or was later invented by victors looking to bolster morale. You inhale deeply, savoring the mingled scent of olive embers and crushed thyme, and feel a subtle shift in the air. The priestess closes her eyes and murmurs an invocation. Hestia, keeper of hearth and home, reveal to us the path that awaits. The mainstay fact. Greek oracles, most famously Delphi, were often associated with gas-induced trance states, though here at Hestia, the medium is neither laurel nor Pythian vapors, but the fire itself. Historians still argue whether the prophetic power of smoke was a practiced art taught through generations, or simply an interpretive performance staged for the hopeful crowd. As the embers glow brighter against the temple's stone, Callista dips a small laurel twig into the hearth, then tilts it so that the rising flames briefly envelop its tip. The wood crackles and pops, sending a tiny shower of sparks that drift into the driftwood-lined excavation pits beneath the hearth. Each spark is said to carry a message, a predator's approach, a bountiful harvest, a lover's return. Beyond the mainstream consensus that laurel symbolized victory and purification in Greek ritual fringe traditions, claim the pattern of sparks forms letters, an ancient script known only to the priestesses. Scholars still debate whether any credible records exist of these letters, or if they're merely fanciful tales spun by ardent followers. You watch as one pilgrim, an anxious farmer from the northern plain, steps forward. He bows deeply before the hearth, offering a small sealed jar of olive oil and a sheaf of barley. He whispers his question, "Will my fields yield enough to endure the coming winter?" Callista accepts his gifts and arranges them by the fire's edge. The crowd tenses. She fans the coals once more. A swirl of smoke rises, shifting into a pattern reminiscent of rippling grain. You catch the glint in the farmer's eyes, hope unfurling like a sail. Callista nods solemnly and speaks, Hestia's flame foretells abundance. Your barns shall overflow. The farmer exclaims a heartfelt Eucharist before retreating, clutching his heart. Some fringe sources assert that this farmer's harvest was so great he repaid the temple tenfold. But historians still argue whether tax records corroborate such miraculous yields or if they reflect routine bumper crops. Nearby, an aristocrat clad in crimson and gold watches with thinly veiled skepticism. He steps forward, seeking assurance for his upcoming political campaign. He places a polished bronze dagger beside the hearth, a token of his ambition. The priestess allows the dagger's hilt to catch a brief tongue of flame, then withdraws it. The metal hisses and glimmers. Smoke rises in a tight spiral, momentarily forming the shape of a columned building. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Callista intones, "The city's favor shall stand like stone. Your cause shall find firm foundation." The aristocrat arches a brow. Was that promise genuine, or simply the priestess indulging his vanity? Historians still argue whether any lamplight-lit consultations swayed actual elections, or if the aristocratic elite used the oracle's pronouncements as mere propaganda. Meanwhile, you notice the novices huddled at the hearth's base, each clutching a tiny lamp lit from the temple flame. They're the next generation of smoke seers, training their eyes and minds to detect subtle shifts in ember color, to feel shifts in rising heat, to interpret even the slightest aroma of burning herb blended into the fire. Their rite of passage requires them to endure 3 nights of silent vigil, falling into trance-like states as they learn to taste the future, according to fringe belief. Yet scholars still debate whether any authentic smoke trances occurred, or if the novices were simply encouraged to conjure visions through guided storytelling. Even you feel a pull toward that smoky altar, as though Hestia's warmth invites you to lean closer, to listen more intently. In your own life, it's easy to forget how symbols like the fire in your home can carry profound meaning. Yet here at this temple hearth, the everyday act of tending embers becomes a living language through which the goddess converses with her people. It's a reminder that in ancient Greece, prophecy didn't always require cryptic verses from Delphi. Sometimes it flickered in the heart of a communal flame. As the ceremony draws to a close, Callista extinguishes the small hearth brazier used for smoke reading, allowing the main fire to reclaim center stage. She speaks the final invocation, "May Hestia's wisdom guide your days and guard your nights." The crowd bursts into applause, soft at first, but swelling with reverence. You join in feeling a sense of connection to countless others who have stood in this same space, hearts alight with hope. Tonight, as you return to your own hearth, consider how embers and smoke can hold more than warmth. They can carry dreams, fears, prayers, and promises. Imagine how your own simple fireplace could serve as an oracle. If you chose to listen, the color of the flame predicting the day ahead, the spiral of the smoke offering guidance on a difficult decision. You may not require a priestess to interpret these signs, but the symbolism remains powerful. In the ancient world, the boundary between miracle and metaphor was porous. Smoke could be a messenger, embers an augur of fortune. Historians still argue whether Hestia's fireplace oracle was an institutional religion's artifice or a genuine conduit to the divine. But as you settle under your own roof tonight, wrapped in the soft glow of your hearth, remember that the line between the sacred and the mundane often blurs, if only we are willing to see and to listen. You arrive at the city gates just as the orange glow of dusk settles over Hestia, and you can practically feel the warmth radiating from its great hearth at the heart of the polis. Here, hospitality isn't merely a courtesy, it's a divine commandment. In this city, every stranger is a guest of Hestia, and every hearth is a sanctuary. As soon as you step inside the walls, the first thing you notice is the lanterns, clay lamps filled with temple-blessed oil suspended over each doorway. They flicker invitingly, signals that no one arrives after sunset without a warm welcome. You probably wouldn't survive more than a few nights wandering dusty roads without modern amenities, but here in Hestia, even the poorest traveler finds shelter and sustenance. In every neighborhood, a designated guest hearth is kept burning around the clock. Mainstream records confirm that public hospitality laws date back to the city's earliest charters. Any passing pilgrim must be offered food, drink, and lodgings by the nearest household, with failure to comply punishable by public censure or fines. Historians still argue whether these laws were rooted in genuine religious fervor or emerged as practical measures to maintain civic order. But the result is clear: strangers here never sleep on cold stones. As you approach a modest domed dwelling marked by a carved olive wood plaque, a kindly matron robes dusted with flour from her evening baking greets you at the door. She waves you inside, inviting you to sit around her hearth's wide stone mantel. The crackling flames reveal a simple spread bowls of barley porridge, sweetened with honey wedges of goat cheese and a loaf of steaming flatbread. You dip a warm piece into olive oil infused with thyme, an age-old recipe said to soothe weary travelers' stomachs. Fringe tales even claim that matron's thyme was gathered from vines nourished by the temple's ash, granting it mild healing properties. Historians still debate whether any real medicinal effects existed, or if it's purely poetic tradition. While you eat, the family listens to your stories, nodding with empathy as you recount your journey's trials. Hospitality here goes beyond feeding and housing. It's an exchange of narratives. In antiquity, Greek xenia, or guest friendship, was sacred, enshrined in Homer's epics. Even Zeus bore the honorary title Xenios, guardian of guests and suppliants. Historians still argue whether these literary precedents shaped civic law or merely reflected pre-existing customs. Either way, Hestia elevates Xenia into everyday devotion, weaving it into the city's communal identity. After your meal, the matron leads you to a low platform beside the hearth, draping a woven blanket over your shoulders. She produces a small amphora of diluted wine and pours you a cup, explaining that sharing wine by fire cements bonds, an echo of ancient libations poured for the gods. As you sip the tart mellow liquid, you feel a deep sense of belonging, as though the very act of being welcomed ignites a spark of home within you. In the morning, you awaken to the aroma of spiced barley gruel and fresh goat's milk. The matron's daughter, eyes bright with curiosity, asks about your homeland, while the matron's husband prepares to escort you partway to your next destination. He offers you a simple wooden token carved with the city's flame emblem, a gift that grants you passage into any guest hearth across Hestia and neighboring towns within the Hestian League. Fringe sources claim these tokens also grant safe conduct by bandits who respect Hestia's law, though scholars still debate whether any such banditry actually honored these amulets or if the stories were later embellishments. As you bid farewell, the matron clasps your hand, reminding you of the final hospitality rite. Before departing, the guest must leave a small offering at the hearth, a sprinkle of grain, a shard of olive wood, so the fire may continue to thrive. This gesture symbolizes the guest's debt of gratitude and ensures the cycle of generosity continues. Mainstream accounts confirm that refusal to leave an offering was considered a grave insult. Some households reportedly left a cold hearth, an unspoken scar of wounded pride. You step back onto the road, token in hand, warmed in body and spirit. In a world where strangers are often met with suspicion, Hestia stands in joyful contrast. Here, the flame of welcome burns as brightly as the sacred hearth itself, a living testament to the belief that every traveler carries a spark of the divine. You trudge through dew-damp fields at dawn, drawn toward the distant glow of scattered bonfires, marking the start of the ritual of first fire. Each year, when the winter chill begins to loosen its grip, Hestia's citizens gather on hilltops and courtyards to rekindle hearths across the region in a synchronized ceremony that unites every home under the goddess's warmth. You probably wouldn't survive a week trying to corral hundreds of open flames without a few singed eyebrows. But here, under practiced supervision, the spectacle is both safe and awe-inspiring. In every household, from grand villas to humble cottages, families build a small pyre of winter season trimmings, olive prunings, dried thyme, and bay leaves on a raised stone hearth. At the appointed hour, a procession of priestesses emerges from the temple torch in hand, bearing the sacred flame that has burned continuously since last year's ceremony. The mainstream fact is clear. Greek cities often held communal fire-lighting rituals. Examples in Argos and Ephesus are recorded on stone inscriptions. But Hestia's version is uniquely elaborate, involving every district and neighborhood in the city's boundaries. Historians still argue whether these fire-lighting festivals evolved from ancient agricultural rites or were institutionalized by civic decree as a show of civic unity. When the torch-bearing priestesses in pristine white robes, embroidered with flame motifs, step onto the central plaza's raised dais, silence falls like a velvet cloak. The high priestess holds the torch aloft, its embers glowing like living fireflies, suspended in the dim morning light. On her signal, she dips the torch's metal tip into a small brazier filled with temple-blessed coals. Sparks shower upward in a delicate cascade, dancing like macrocosmic sparks in slow motion. Fringe tradition whispers that those sparks occasionally take the shape of tiny flames, miniature Hestia's children that flit from brazier to brazier. Though skeptical scholars still debate whether eyewitnesses truly saw these flame sprites, or if it's just the mind's playful trickery at dawn's low light. As the brazier's embers roar, the high priestess calls out a single word: ignite. In that heartbeat, a wave of torch-lit flame surges through the crowd. Novices carry flickering torches into side streets, lighting braziers one by one. Town criers stand at doorways, their voices rising in joyous cry. Hestia's fire breathe anew. The ritual's resonance is palpable. Every crackle, every whoosh of flame, every whispered prayer feeds into a collective heartbeat that pulses through the city's arteries. Meanwhile, you edge closer to your own hearth, at home. You kneel by the faded stone hearth, clutching a clay lamp you've kept stoked overnight. As the torchbearer approaches, the torch's fire leaps into your lamp in a breath of brilliance, an ephemeral plume of flame that seems to hum with divine energy. You tip the lamp, and its wick blazes instantly. The fringe claim that when this first lamp sparks perfectly burning blue for a single breath, it signifies a year of exceptional fortune. Historians still argue whether any consistent records of such blue flame occurrences exist, or if those accounts were later embellishments by enthusiastic storytellers. With your hearth lamp lit, you step back and offer a soft chant. From this flame, our hearts reclaim light and life. Your family stands behind you, children, wide-eyed elders, nodding with quiet pride, each reciting the line in unison. Across the region, thousands of voices echo the same invocation, creating a rolling chorus that seems to resonate with the land itself. Archaeological finds of Wanokawai wine jugs inscribed with festival dedications confirm that communal libations accompanied these ceremonies. Mainstream archaeologists agree that wine was poured into hearth braziers to honor both Hestia and Dionysus in a rare syncretic practice, though some scholars still debate whether this co-worship reflects genuine religious fusion or merely a pragmatic celebration of harvest and hospitality. After the initial ignition, families place small offerings on the hearth, a pinch of barley, a drop of oil, a sprig of bay. These gestures symbolize gratitude for warmth and sustenance through the cold months. Fringe texts suggest that some households slipped secret written petitions beneath the hearth's rim, prayers for love, prosperity, or healing, believing that Hestia's flame would carry their wishes skyward. Historians remain divided on whether any such petitions have been unearthed in excavation or if they exist only in the poetic imaginations of later writers. Outside you watch as the entire city shines like a field of living stars, every home's window frames filled with amber light. Street musicians take their places by the main square's perimeter, playing soft lyre melodies synced to the flame's rhythm. Folk dancers weave gracefully between columns of flame, their colorful garments flickering in the torchlight. It's a sensory tapestry, crackle of wood, murmur of prayers, scent of herbs, burning, shimmering glow of fire against stone. You might think it overwhelming, but in practice, the ritual unfolds with a controlled elegance born of generations of refinement. As darkness fully yields to the earliest sunrise, you and your neighbors share the festival's second act, the communal breakfast. Long tables are set beside communal hearths along the main avenue, laden with hot porridge, sweetened with honey, roasted olives, and spiced cheeses, warmed by smoldering embers. You bite into a spoonful of barley gruel, its warmth flooding your senses, and realize this shared meal is the festival's true heart-nourishing, both body and spirit, in a communal embrace. Throughout the morning, the priestesses move among the hearths, collecting a small ember from each home's first fire. They return to the temple, where these embers are mingled into the central brazier, ensuring that next year's sacred flame carries the collective warmth of every household. This symbolic gesture, mainstream sources confirm, reinforces the bonds of civic identity, literally blending every home's flame into one communal fire. Scholars still argue whether this practice began as a pious addition by temple authorities or emerged from grassroots tradition. But its significance is undeniable: unity forged in fire. Finally, as the process concludes, the city offers a final chorus of thanksgiving. Bells toll across Hestia, signaling the ritual of first fire's end and the official start of the New Year's cycle. The people disperse, carrying their hearth lamps back home, their hearts buoyed by the solidarity of shared flame. You tuck your lamp into its carved niche, careful to keep its glow steady, knowing you'll return tomorrow to tend fresh embers. In the centuries to come, Roman visitors will marvel at Hestia's fire-lighting festival, comparing it to their own Vestalia rites in Rome. Historians will note similarities and differences, suggesting cultural borrowing or parallel evolution. Yet none will quite capture the living spirit you've witnessed, the way a single spark can ignite not just wood, but the hearts of an entire community. Tonight, as you finally collapse into rest, feel the pulsing warmth of that morning's flame still glowing within you. Let it drift with you into sleep, reminding you that even in the darkest season, the light of shared devotion can rekindle every hearth, every hope, and every dream. You rise with the sun's first rosy rays spilling through your window and make your way to the temple precinct, the memory of yesterday's festival of first fire, still warm in your bones. Today you're here to bear witness to the sacred laws of the flame. Ancient statutes inscribed on marble steles that govern every aspect of Hestia's hearth, from the cathedral hearth at the city center to the humblest cooking glow in the alleyways. These laws exist to protect the divine fire, ensuring that its eternal glow remains unbroken by human negligence or malice. In the grand antechamber, you find 4 towering stelae, each hewn from Thessalian marble and etched with inscriptions. The first stone proclaims the law of continuity. No hand shall quench Hestia's flame, nor shall any wood unkindled from her brazier be laid to hearth. This mainstream decree underscores the centrality of the eternal fire. Every hearth fire in Hestia and every lamp in the Hestian League must trace its origin directly to the temple's sacred coals. Failure to ignite from this source risks spiritual impurity, a stain on both home and soul. The second stele delineates the law of exclusivity. Only priestesses and duly appointed temple artisans may perform the great kindling. In other words, only sanctioned individuals may handle the ceremony of transferring the flame in official rituals. Ordinary citizens may stoke their own hearths, but the initial spark, be it for ritual public dedication or major civic festival, must always be conducted by those ordained by Hestia's temple. Fringe tales suggest that an undignified amateur attempting the great kindling once unleashed a malodorous smoke burst. Historians still argue whether this incident was an isolated accident or later mythologized to reinforce priestly authority. The third inscription sets forth the law of sanctuary. Within the precincts of the hearth, no weapon may be drawn, no dispute may be waged. This fire-lit sanctuary extends to every household's hearth corner and every public brazier. It is unlawful to carry arms past a burning hearth's glow, and any threats spoken within earshot of the sacred flame carry double weight in court. Mainstream legal records confirm that disputes initiated by hearthside insult could lead to swift confiscation of arms and mandatory reconciliation ceremonies. Scholars still debate whether these laws genuinely curtailed domestic violence, or if families merely relocated feuds to the street corner out of pious obligation. The fourth and final law is the law of restitution. Should the sacred flame be extinguished by human fault, the offender must rekindle it with his own hands and serve the temple for a moon cycle. This provision ensures accountability. Any individual whose negligence or ill intent causes the temple's hearth to die must personally atone through direct service, mending ritual tools, gathering sacrificial wood, or assisting the priestesses in routine ceremonies. Fringe sources whisper of a merchant who, after a heated argument, collapsed a brazier's supports and left the temple dark until dawn. He spent 30 days sweeping the courtyard. At dawn and dusk, a humbling penance that left his family's reputation tarnished for generations. Historians still argue whether such severe restitution was common practice or a legendary cautionary tale designed to deter sabotage. You note that each law concludes with the same oath. By these statutes, Hestia binds our hearts to hearth and home. Every citizen, from newborn infants to octogenarian elders, swears allegiance to these laws in their coming-of-age rites and passing on ceremonies. Even visiting dignitaries from allied city-states are welcomed only after public recitation of the oath. Refusal to comply can freeze diplomatic relations and cut off grain and olive oil shipments. Mainstream diplomatic correspondences confirm that envoys from Salamis and Miletus carried copies of these laws in gilded boxes, acknowledging the central role of Hestia's flame in interpolis cohesion. As you step back from the stelae, the air shimmers with incense smoke swirling toward the domed ceiling. Priestesses glide past in silent processions, bearing bundles of laurel and olive boughs to lay at the stone's bases, renewing the law's sacred charge. The high priestess pronounces a blessing, her voice echoing, "May none outrival the flame in vigilance, nor dim the light in negligence." The words settle on you like a mantle of solemn duty, a reminder that Hestia's fire is not a mere utility, but a living covenant between deity and polis. Outside the temple, you encounter a throng gathered for a ceremonial review of the laws. A robed herald reads aloud each statute, pausing for the crowd's rhythmic response. So shall it be upheld before the herald moves to the next. You join in marveling at how the simple phrase, echoed hundreds of times, forges unity among farmers, artisans, nobles, and slaves alike. Fringe anthropological theories suggest that the chorused recitation induces a mild group trance, reinforcing communal bonds through synchronized speech. Scholars still debate whether this effect was intentional or an incidental byproduct of ritual. Later, you visit a family home to observe how the laws play out on the domestic scale. The matriarch, an elderly woman named Pyra, kneels before her hearth to perform the evening oblation, a daily tribute of a single olive wood chip and a libation of consecrated water. She places her hand on the hearth's rim, eyes closed, and whispers the law of continuity's oath. By Hestia's flame, by hearth and home I kindle and rekindle. Her granddaughter watches intently. Soon to recite the same oath at her own ceremony next moon. You witness how the laws, though inscribed in temple marble, breathe life in everyday rituals, shaping behavior and belief at the home's heart. In the city's judicial hall, you observe a hearing involving a foundling soldier accused of accidentally extinguishing a curbside brazier during a drunken brawl. The defendant stands before the magistrates, head bowed. Witnesses, shopkeepers, and passers-by testify to the soldier's negligence. The soldier is given the option of paying a hefty fine in olive oil or performing a month's service sweeping temple courtyards. He chooses penance, kneeling at the hearth in the temple's outer courtyard to rake ashes and polish brass hooks, an act of restitution echoing the law of restitution. The magistrate's final pronouncement emphasizes restoration over punishment. Let his labor rekindle not only the flame, but his honor. This public act reinforces the law's role in moral as well as ritual order. Finally, you attend the High Council's monthly forum, where senior priestesses and civic leaders debate proposed amendments to the sacred laws. Today's agenda includes a petition to formalize penalties for accidental hearth fires that spread to neighbors' dwellings, a growing concern in the city's densely packed quarters. Some councilors argue for stricter fines. Theologians cite Hestia's teachings on compassion and propose alternative service-based reparations. Historians still puzzle over whether any substantial changes were ever ratified or if the council's deliberations remain more ceremonial than legislative. Regardless, the forum demonstrates how the sacred laws of the flame continue to evolve, reflecting the living nature of Hestia's covenant with her people. As dusk falls and you make your way home, the glow of countless hearths greets you, a testament to laws, upheld oaths, sworn, and communities bound by a single sacred fire. You kneel by your own hearth, touching its warm rim and echoing the law of continuity. By Hestia's flame, by hearth and home, I kindle and rekindle. In that moment, you feel the weight of tradition and the spark of personal responsibility entwine, linking you to every heart that beats in warmth across Hestia and beyond. The next morning arrives with a hush, as if even the breeze dares not disturb the momentous ritual about to unfold. You're up early, lured by the promise of something rare, the passing of the ember, a solemn rite that only happens once every 9 years, when the city's eternal flame is ceremonially refreshed. This isn't about relighting it, that would be sacrilegious, but rather transferring its essence to a new brazier, symbolizing spiritual renewal, without ever letting the original light die. You follow a procession of barefooted priestesses up the winding path of Mount Talandra, where a new brazier, carved from the same black volcanic stone that lines the temple floor, awaits its first breath of fire. The old brazier has been serving faithfully since the last passing, and while still functional, the tradition insists on renewal to mirror the natural cycle of death and rebirth. You'd think stone wouldn't wear out, but apparently, in a sacred sense, it does. Historians still argue whether this practice originated from a true need to replace aged templeware or emerged from an older animist belief that even objects grow tired. At the summit, you witness the old brazier's coals being gently transferred, one glowing ember at a time, with bronze tongs shaped like stylized olive branches. The entire process takes hours. Each ember is placed onto a small mound of juniper twigs inside the new brazier, which has been cured with sacred oils for months. As the flames finally stir to life, the high priestess intones, "From hearth to hearth, from breath to breath, Hestia remains." A chorus of priestesses echoes her, their voices floating over the hillside like mist. You stand in silence, watching as the fire leaps and steadies a new home, now holding the same eternal spirit. You probably wouldn't trust an ancient ceremony that hinges on not dropping a single coal, but these priestesses have steady hands and lifetimes of practice. The crowd is breathless throughout. If a coal were to fall and extinguish, it would be seen as an omen, a bad one. Fringe tales tell of a passing where a gust of wind snuffed an ember midair. The flame was rekindled in time, but a plague followed that winter. Historians still argue whether this was causation or coincidence, or simply a convenient scapegoat for a bad harvest. After the new brazier is ignited, a handful of its coals are placed in a sealed bronze sphere, no larger than a bread loaf, which will be carried back to the city in an all-night torchlight procession. It's called the Womb of Flame, and it's locked with 3 keys each, held by a different high priestess. This is both symbolic and extremely practical. People in ancient times really liked making sure no one person could ruin everything. As the procession descends the mountain, you walk among them, a sea of white-robed figures, each carrying a lantern fueled by oil from the last harvest's first olives. There's something deeply hypnotic about it. The steady pace, the soft murmur of chants, the scent of sage and pine resin burned in clay thuribles. Children, usually jittery, walk with solemn faces, knowing they're watching something their own children will likely witness a generation later. A priest murmurs beside you that the path must not deviate. No shortcuts allowed, even if it means climbing through bramble or skirting a dry ravine. Hestia never cuts corners, he chuckles softly. As the torchbearers reach the city gates, the great bell of the central temple tolls 11 times. Gates open, and a silent crowd parts to let the womb of flame pass through. Mainstream sources describe this moment as one of near mystical awe. Even skeptics reportedly fall quiet, as if the presence of the fire hushes all doubt. You trail behind, watching, as the bronze sphere is set on a marble pedestal in the temple's inner sanctum. Tomorrow the high priestesses will light a fresh array of coals from it, dispersing them to all major hearths in the city. Public squares, bakeries, bathhouses, and of course, the palace kitchen. The new cycle begins. Later, you join a small group of older citizens gathered in the plaza. They sit sipping diluted wine, sharing stories of previous passings. One woman recalls her father carrying a coal back to their village in a clay lamp strapped to his chest, taking shelter in caves to protect it from wind. Another swears she saw the flames dance into shapes, a dove, a lion, and a snake, just before her brother returned safely from war. Fringe interpretations love these symbols. Some claim they represent Hestia's three faces: peace, vigilance, and cunning. Scholars still argue whether these readings are ancient truths or later poetic insertions by mystics with good imaginations. You think back to the moment the ember touched new stone, and you realize the brilliance of this tradition. By never letting the flame die, they make it immortal. But by moving it, housing it in new vessels, they also keep it alive. It's the perfect paradox, changeless change. And in that paradox, the people of Hestia find meaning. As the crowd disperses and the embers dim into a softer glow, you walk back to your lodging, heart warm, mind quiet. The fire has passed, but it has never truly moved. It just keeps finding new homes. You wake to the soft clatter of bronze pots and the smell of pine smoke curling beneath your door. It's day 2 of the ember cycle, when all public hearths, markets, bakeries, bathhouses, and even roadside shrines receive their portion of the sacred flame. You throw on your cloak and head out to follow the flicker trail through the waking city. Today is less solemn, more practical, but that doesn't make it any less sacred. Down in the lower quarter, you find a crowd gathered at the Baker's Plaza. 4 priestesses stand in a tight circle, cupping a small ember box lined with volcanic ash. Inside glows a coal taken from the womb of flame, kept alive through the night in oil-soaked linen. The baker, a burly man with flower-streaked forearms, kneels to light the wood in his oven. The second it catches the crowd, claps softly. He bows not to the people, but to the flame. The symbolism isn't hard to miss. Fire, the source of sustenance, gifted by a goddess. Mainstream scholarship agrees this act is a holdover from Bronze Age rites, where grain stores were ritually burned to bless the next harvest. But here, instead of sacrifice, it's service. Every loaf of bread baked in this oven over the coming months is believed to carry a trace of Hestia's favor. And, yes, that means every burnt crust and lopsided bun is technically divine, though you probably still wouldn't eat a day-old rye that tastes like brick. You follow the procession again, this time to the public baths. Unlike Rome's sprawling complexes, Hestia's bathhouses are modest single-story buildings with heated floors and cedar-paneled steam rooms. But what they lack in size, they make up for in heart. The hearth in the women's side is being relit as you arrive, flames licking gently beneath the raised marble bench. A priestess blesses the water with drops of rosemary oil and whispers, "May this warmth cleanse body and mind. A fringe legend says the goddess herself once bathed in a spring behind the temple, leaving behind a ring of perfectly smooth stones that still bubble with gentle heat. Historians still argue whether these hot stones exist or were simply geothermally active pockets someone poeticized a bit too hard. Still, you note the subtle care taken by the bath attendants today. Every ladle poured, every towel folded, seems more reverent. Warmth isn't just heat, it's hospitality, comfort, connection. By mid-afternoon, the torchbearers reach the agora, the bustling central market. The fire for the merchant's brazier is passed to the official weighing station where it burns next to the city's standard weights and measures. This isn't just symbolic, it's a civic declaration. Fair trade blessed by divine flame. You hear one merchant mutter, "If I get shortchanged today, I'll know even the goddess is judging me." Fringe records suggest that in times of famine, merchants were required to relight their stalls' coals each morning from the sacred hearth as a way to enforce honesty. Scholars still debate if that was truly a law or just a cleverly disguised moral threat. You stop for a fig pastry and sit beneath an olive tree to rest. Around you, kids chase one another with wax torches laughing. Elders sit in shaded corners recounting old fire myths, like the one where a jealous river spirit tried to steal Hestia's flame by flooding the temple, only to be turned into steam and forced to reign over the city forever. You think of the temple's high dome, its ceiling painted with coiling waves and dancing sparks, and wonder if that story inspired its design. As the sun begins to dip low, the last of the flame procession moves toward the outer gates, to the small altars lining the roads into the city. Travelers often stop here to pray before leaving or arriving. You trail after them, drawn by the quieter energy of this final leg. The countryside glows under the fading sky, and the air smells of thyme and warming dust. Each roadside altar receives a tiny clay lamp lit and sealed with wax to burn for the next 7 days. It's said that no one ever touches these lamps. Even thieves steer clear, afraid of Hestia's curse. Mainstream historians suggest that fear of divine retribution was an effective social control system, especially in rural areas with little law enforcement. You stand beside one of the altars and whisper a small intention, not a wish exactly, but a thought for someone far away. The flame catches the wind and flickers sideways, as if nodding. Whether it's divine or coincidence, you decide not to question it. You just smile. Walking back through the darkened city, you pass dozens of windows, glowing with the same amber light. Some people sit silently before their hearths. Others drink wine, read scrolls, or sing softly. There's a rhythm here, a pulse. You feel it. The fire has moved. The fire has stayed. The fire is in everyone now. When you return to your lodging, you find your hearth still alight, its flame calm, steady, like it's been waiting for you. You settle beside it and warm your hands, letting your shoulders drop, your breath slow. Outside you hear the faint echo of temple bells, marking the closing of the ember cycle's second day. And, for the first time in a long time, you feel perfectly, irrevocably at home. Night deepens, but the city doesn't sleep. Not quite. Tonight marks the Ember Vigil, a quiet but widespread tradition where households, inns, and temples keep a single person awake through the dark hours to watch the fire, just as the ancients once did in times of war or drought. You volunteered at your lodging more out of curiosity than piety. The host family smiles knowingly and hands you a small bronze poker and a cup of wine, saying, "Just don't fall asleep before the coals do." You settle cross-legged beside the hearth, wrapped in a woven blanket that smells faintly of cedar. The fire dances gently, needing no tending, but you still prod it occasionally to look busy. Outside you can hear the distant clatter of hoofbeats and the faint bray of a donkey, but otherwise it's still eerily so. The world feels paused. Even the stars above Hestia seem to blink more slowly. According to mainstream records, this vigil custom evolved from ancient sentry duty when towns assigned young initiates to guard the sacred flame overnight, testing both discipline and spiritual resolve. But fringe traditions take it further, suggesting that the flame becomes aware in these hours, whispering insights or warnings to those who stay awake beside it. One myth tells of a girl who during her vigil dreamt with eyes wide open and awoke speaking in verses. The verses were nonsense, but people still wrote them down, just in case. You poke the coals, nothing prophetic yet. You sip your wine and stretch your legs. Firelight flickers across the floorboards in shapes that almost look like footprints. Or maybe that's just your imagination. Historians still argue whether such stories were ever meant literally or simply served as comforting metaphors, ways to lend deeper meaning to a night alone with one's thoughts. Your host's cat, a sleek black creature named Fig Pads, into the room and curls beside you. You scratch behind her ears and whisper your theories on why Hestia never had scandalous myths like the other gods. Fig purrs as if in agreement. Honestly, it's refreshing. While Zeus was out turning into swans and cows, Hestia was just lighting fires and making sure everyone got dinner. You admire that kind of divine consistency. Midnight drifts closer. You toss a pinch of salt into the flames, an old gesture meant to banish bad dreams. The salt pops and hisses, a sound oddly satisfying. You glance around. Still no visitations, no glowing messages in the embers. Just warmth, stillness, a deepening sense of belonging. You think maybe that's the whole point. Suddenly you recall a line from a scroll you saw in the temple archive. The fire is not to speak, but to stay. Simple, profound. Maybe that's what Hestia was trying to teach all along. You don't need a vision or a burning bush. You just need a place that doesn't flicker when the rest of life does. As the hour creeps past one, your thoughts wander to the city itself, how it's built entirely around the central flame. Even the street layout fans outward from the hearth temple like spokes on a wheel. Fringe scholars point to this as evidence of a hearth-first city model, arguing that the flame wasn't just religious but also architectural, strategic, and psychological. The city was planned so that no citizen would ever be more than a 15-minute walk from fire. You shift position, wrapping the blanket tighter. Fig has moved to your lap, her tail twitching in slow rhythmic pulses. The fire has dipped slightly. You add a few slivers of olive wood and breathe in the scent, sharp, clean, familiar. A priest once told you that olive wood crackles more when the air carries unrest. Tonight it's silent. Time passes without urgency. You think about people across the city doing the same, sitting quietly, watching, maybe talking to cats, maybe not. There's something oddly unifying in the silence, a soft chorus of solitude. Eventually, the sky begins to pale at the edges, and the first birds start their low, uncertain chirping. You check the coals, still glowing, still steady. You've done your part. You kept watch. Your host family stirs. They greet you with a smile, place a hand on your shoulder, and hand you a warm mug of barley tea. No praise, no ceremony, just that look of recognition that says, you were here, you were present. That's enough. And maybe that's the deepest magic of this whole tradition. Not the myth, not the sacred geometry, or the whispered omens, but simply the act of tending, staying, showing up, even when nothing happens, especially when nothing happens. By mid-morning, the hush of the ember vigil gives way to soft chatter and clinking ceramic. You're back at the temple, sipping a mild broth, while the city slowly reanimates around you. The fire is still burning in the central hearth, though it's been stirred gently and reshaped into a spiral pattern by the high priestess, a symbolic nod to the cycle of return. Spirals are everywhere in Hestia, in tile mosaics, in embroidery, even in how the streets wind outward from the sacred center like a slowly unfurling thought. You stretch your limbs and wander into the temple's lesser-known west wing, where they keep the older relics, half-burned scrolls, cracked, offering bowls, faded mural fragments. There's something deeply comforting about how imperfect everything is. Nothing is preserved in pristine gold or alabaster. It's all a little broken, a little scorched, as if the goddess herself preferred warmth over polish. A priest in training invites you to observe the midday restoration ritual. This is not about offerings or chants. It's more like spiritual janitorial work. He explains that each week the hearth bricks are realigned, just slightly cleaned, with a mixture of ash and rosemary and re-oiled to keep the structure alive. It's like giving the fire a stretch, he says. Mainstream scholars often overlook this practice, calling it domestic maintenance, but oral tradition treats it as a sacred renewal, a way to remind the flame that it's wanted. You join in, kneeling beside the hearth to wipe soot from the lowest stones. Your fingertips come away blackened and fragrant. Across from you, Another visitor is quietly brushing away debris with a bundle of lavender stalks tied in red string. No one speaks. You don't need to. The gesture speaks for itself. This is care. This is attention. This is belonging. The priest tells you about the kleos of embers, a poem passed orally through the temple stewards which chronicles all the recorded times the fire has faltered. The cold winters, the floods, the year of smoke sickness. Each verse ends with a soft refrain, but still it warmed a hand. Still it found breath. It's not a victory chant. It's a resilience lullaby. Historians still debate whether this poem was ever written down or exists only in fragments heard during full moon ceremonies. Either way, it lives. While helping to polish a bronze incense holder shaped like a fig leaf, you ask a nearby elder, what happens if the fire ever truly dies? She considers for a moment, then says softly, then we start again, but not from nothing, from memory. You feel that settle into your chest like a slow breath. Memory, it seems, is the fuel that never fully burns out. In the outer courtyard, children are drawing hearth symbols in chalk flames, circles, spirals, even miniature floor plans of houses with exaggerated central fires. One girl tells you her drawing is a map of her grandmother's kitchen where soup lives. Another proudly shows you her flame with wings, declaring it's a sky hearth that follows her when she travels. You nod solemnly. Sacred architecture of the soul, built in chalk. As the sun reaches its zenith, you watch a pair of elderly stewards conduct a shadow-measuring rite. Using a polished bronze disc, they track the direction of the flame's smoke and align it with the noon sun. This helps them decide whether to adjust the temple's vents or, as one of them jokes, whether Hestia wants a nap or a dance today. Fringe lore holds that a perfectly vertical smoke column on this day predicts an uneventful harvest, which in ancient times was considered a blessing. Boring meant survival. You pause at the temple's open threshold and look back once more. The fire is there, not flickering wildly, not blazing, just burning, calm, present. It doesn't call attention to itself. It just is. There is a kind of majesty in that. No thunder, no grand pronouncements, just a steady glow that's quietly kept a city's heart beating for centuries. Back in the streets, you spot a small bakery that wasn't open yesterday. A sign outside reads, "Hearth bread, made from the morning's blessing." You buy a loaf. It's warm, dense, and laced with rosemary. As you bite in, you imagine the thread of sacred flame woven through each crumb, a line of continuity stretching back to the first spark that ever lit a cold cave. You walk on with the bread tucked under your arm, the warmth of it seeping through your sleeve. Hestia's presence lingers in every doorway. You pass every flicker behind glass, every chimney plume that curls into the afternoon sky. Not demanding worship, just reminding you she's there. The city feels different now, not louder or busier, just more awake. more intentional. You get the sense that this place doesn't run on rules or rituals alone. It runs on the quiet promise that someone somewhere will always keep the fire going. And right now, that someone is you. Afternoon light slants golden through the city's narrow alleys, gilding windowsills and dust motes with a sleepy kind of radiance. You take the long way back to your lodging loaf of hearth bread still warm under your arm, tracing side streets that branch like veins from the temple's heart. Even now you find new shrines tucked into courtyards, shaded by fig trees or carved directly into old walls. Hestia seems less like a goddess and more like a whisper constant, comforting, half forgotten, until the moment you need her. You pause at a small open-air gallery dedicated to the quiet deeds, a collection of anonymous clay reliefs celebrating the city's caretakers, not heroes, not warriors, just people who kept the lights on. One tile shows a midwife boiling water over a tiny hearth. Another, a mason pressing fire-warmed bricks into a frostbitten wall. There's even one of a boy drying wet shoes near an oven. All these tiny, unglamorous acts, preserved in terracotta and soot. Historians still argue whether this gallery is ancient or a later invention during the hearth renaissance of the 3rd century BCE, when urban planners deliberately recentered community life around public ovens and bathhouses. Regardless of its age, the intention is clear. This city remembers the invisible hands that kept it warm. Further down the lane, you pass the remains of a collapsed stone oven now overgrown with herbs. A bronze plaque nearby reads simply, "She kept it burning until the end." There's no name, no date, just the echo of someone who stayed. You stop at a quiet tavern, its name etched above the door in curling script, Ember's End. Inside, the air is thick with steam and the scent of lentils. Locals sip slowly from terracotta bowls, their fingers wrapped around cups for warmth as much as taste. The owner, a round-shouldered man with kind eyes, nods to the fireplace with pride. "Coals from my grandmother's hearth," he says. "Still got the black stone beneath." You sit, sip, listen. A musician in the corner plays a hollow wooden flute, soft winding notes that rise like smoke and vanish before they settle. The room doesn't hush for the music. It just softens. You notice someone leave a folded scrap of paper on the mantel before slipping out. No one touches it. Maybe it's a prayer, or a recipe, or just a reminder. After the meal, the owner offers you a tour of his family's old kitchen below the tavern. You descend narrow stairs into a cool cellar lit by a single flickering lamp. The hearth here is different, low, circular, half sunk into the ground. Built like the old ways, he says. No chimney. Smoke taught us patience. He kneels and lifts a small stone tile, revealing a hidden niche with a cache of keepsakes, a cracked ladle, a strand of red yarn, a child's drawing of a fire with a smiley face in the middle. Great-grandma said, The hearth listens, he tells you. Not with ears, though. It listens by staying. You nod, the weight of that sentiment settling in your chest like coals tucked under ash, quiet, smoldering, persistent. Outside again, you walk without direction. The city bends gently around you, as if nudging you towards something unsaid. A breeze curls around your ankles, smelling faintly of sage and wood smoke. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once and falls silent. The world narrows to footsteps and breath. Then, rounding a corner, you find a building without walls. It's called the Hearth Garden. Here, instead of shrines or columns, there's just a large circular clearing lined with benches and low-growing thyme. In the center, a single hearth burns, not large, not ceremonial, just present. People come and go, not to worship, but to rest. A woman reads beside it, a child naps nearby, with her head on her father's knee. No one speaks above a whisper. You sit, you watch. You don't know how long you stay. Eventually, someone places a fresh log on the fire, the sound of crackling wood, soft as breath. No applause, no blessing, just continuity. You realize slowly that this city wasn't built around a fire. It was built by one. Evening creeps in with a soft shrug, casting long lilac shadows through the city's folds. The sun lowers behind distant olive hills, and Hestia exhales. You feel it in the shift of footsteps, the hush of open windows, the slow unfurling of quiet. It's not sleep yet. It's something gentler, a collective leaning toward rest, like the city itself is curling up under a warm blanket. You find yourself walking back toward the temple district, drawn not by duty, but by a strange sense of gravity. The closer you come, the more aware you become of the hearths tucked behind doors, in kitchens, under arches. Some glow bright, others flicker dimly, but none are out. At one house, a mother is ladling soup into a carved bowl while her daughter watches the fire. Don't stare too long, the mother warns, or she'll see into your thoughts. The girl nods solemnly, then immediately stares harder. You smile. Historians still argue whether Hestia was truly omniscient within her flames, or if it was just a metaphor for presence. Either way, her reputation for gentle awareness lingers. As twilight deepens, a bell rings, not loudly, but enough to make you pause. The city is preparing for the circle of flame, a ritual held once every 3 lunar cycles, where citizens walk the perimeter of the city with small lit braziers, reconnecting every district to the central hearth. Think of it as sacred urban Wi-Fi maintenance. You're handed a tiny terracotta lamp with a palm-sized flame freshly lit from the temple's core. Its warmth pulses in your hand like a heartbeat. You join the slow procession, dozens, maybe hundreds of quiet souls walking together, flames flickering in sync. The only sound, the soft scuff of sandals and the occasional crackle of oil-soaked wicks. As you pass through each neighborhood, residents step forward to touch their own lamps to yours, a chain of fire moving outward. One man lifts his lantern toward a rooftop shrine. A girl giggles as her dog tries to sniff the flame. The city becomes a constellation, stars in motion, tethered by breath and purpose. Fringe stories tell of a time the ritual failed when a great storm blew out every flame, except one hidden in a baker's oven. The baker, they say, stayed awake 3 nights stoking it with bread crusts and kindling scraps until the winds passed. Whether it's true or not, every baker in Hestia keeps a small lamp by their oven now, just in case. The walk brings you to the old aqueduct where the fire-bearers pause for a moment of silence. Water and fire twin needs. Balance. There's a sense of poetry here. 2 elements that should cancel each other out, held together in reverence. The city doesn't force one to dominate. It lets them coexist. You think of all the cities you've known where power meant loudness, conquest, spectacle. Here, power is quieter. It listens. It tends. It waits. As the final stretch of the walk begins, you glance down a side alley and see a boy crouched beside a broken lamp. His flame is out. He doesn't cry. He just waits. You kneel beside him and offer your lamp. He holds it close. The flames kiss. His eyes widen. "Thanks," he whispers. You nod. No big deal. But it is. Returning to the central plaza, everyone places their lamps on the wide stone platform around the temple. Hundreds of tiny flames now form a ring encircling the great hearth in the middle. From above, it must look like an iris, the city's eye open and watching the night unfold. The priestess approaches, not with a speech, but with a simple gesture. She opens her hands. That's it. A symbol of release, of offering. The crowd echoes it, raising palms to the firelight, letting go of whatever burdens they carried in. No chanting, no drama, just stillness and open hands. Then, slowly, people begin to leave, some laughing, softly others, arm in arm, children falling asleep on shoulders. The circle has been drawn. The fire has reached every edge. It will find its way back again. You linger a while longer, watching, breathing, listening to the fire speak in crackles and pops and soft sighs. You think of Hestia not as a goddess, not even as a myth, but as a pattern, a choice, to tend, to warm, to stay. And in that glow, the city sleeps, with one eye open, watching, yes, but not guarding, just remembering. Night deepens, not in a dramatic shadow-swallowing way, but like honey slowly thickening, coating everything with silence and slowness. Street corners grow still. Window shutters close with soft wooden sighs. Even the cats seem to whisper as they weave between stairwells. You wander back toward your own quarters, flame still flickering in your mind, even if your lamp has long been surrendered. The air is cooler now, laced with sage and chimney smoke. Somewhere nearby, a lullaby drifts from an open window. You can't make out the words, but you recognize the melody. It's the song of the first flame, taught to every child born in Hestia. Not for religion, just tradition, like tying your shoes or whistling for pigeons. You pass a narrow archway lined with carved stones, each engraved with a single name and a date. A modest monument. These are the names of citizens who tended communal hearths during crises, droughts, fires, siege, even plague. You run your fingers over the names, wondering which ones stayed when others fled. Historians still argue whether Hestia truly survived the Great Silence of 123 BCE solely because of its hearthkeepers, but every version of the story gives them credit. Turning into a quieter lane, you find something unexpected. A group of children huddled around an old woman. She's crouched low on a mat, coaxing flame from a shallow clay bowl with slow, rhythmic breaths. Her hands are wrinkled steady. Her voice is low and warm. Fire doesn't like to be ordered, she tells them. It likes to be invited. The kids nod solemnly, offering bits of bark and olive pit like tributes. She teaches them the spiral method, how to lay the kindling in a soft swirl, to breathe, not like you're blowing out candles, but like you're singing to coals. You watch for a while unnoticed, struck by the intimacy of the lesson. No textbooks, no temples, just a human, a flame, and time. A sudden gust pulls your attention to the rooftops where tiny ceramic wind chimes sing their off-key lullabies, each chime shaped like a different flame, long tongues, curled spirals, jagged bursts. It's a citywide collection. In some homes, lighting your hearth also means winding your wind chime. The combination of firelight and sound marks your presence, not for safety, for story. You wonder what your flame would sound like. Passing a bathhouse, you notice a late-night bather seated on the outer steps, steam rising off his skin in ghostly ribbons. He nods to you and gestures at a small brick oven tucked beside the door. Coals from my grandmother's bakery, he says, still warm enough to heat the floor tiles. You nod. Of course. Why wouldn't a bathhouse borrow warmth from memory? Further on, a library closed, but you peek through the latticed window. Inside, near the philosophy section, a single low hearth glows under a hanging cauldron of tea. You wonder if the last reader forgot to put it out, or if the librarian simply believes ideas, like tea, steep best with patience and heat. And then, as you round the last corner before home, you find it. A circle of stones, old, worn, unremarkable. But in the middle sits a hearth, cold, unlit. A plaque beside it reads, "When you are ready, light it." It's not a demand. It's not even an instruction. It's a whisper of permission. You sit beside it for a while. You don't light it, not yet. But you press your palm to the cold stone, and for just a moment it feels like something stirs beneath. Not fire, not magic, just the memory of warmth waiting to return. It's enough. As you rise, the city seems to exhale around you, not in exhaustion, but in rhythm. Hestia breathing quietly through its hearths. You walk slower now, not from tiredness, from gratitude. In the dark behind you, something glows faintly. Maybe you lit it after all. You're almost home. Whatever home means in a city like Hestia, where doors stay open longer than memories, and every night is a slow conversation between flame and stone. As you climb the steps to your guest quarters, the floor creaks with the kind of welcome only old buildings can give. There's no light burning yet, but the hearth sits ready, laid carefully with dry fig bark, pressed leaves, and a small pine cone in the center like a secret. You don't rush. Instead, you sit cross-legged on the cool floor and let the stillness settle over you. In your pocket is a bit of oil-dipped wick someone pressed into your hand earlier during the circle of flame. For later, they said. Apparently, now is later. You place the wick delicately at the heart of the nest. One strike of flint. 2. On the third, a spark jumps, pauses, then unfurls into life. The flame wiggles like a sleepy kitten, then steadies. This is not just lighting a fire. This is a dialogue. As warmth slowly radiates through the room, you think about what it must have felt like to be the first person in Hestia to ever light a hearth. Not borrow one, not share one, but build something from scratch and ask the flame to stay. Historians still debate whether the city's founders were exiles, pilgrims, or accidental settlers. One version claims they were sent by the Delphic oracle to find the place where flame grows without wood. Another version, less dramatic, says they just really hated wind and chose a low valley. Either way, the result was the same: a city organized around its fires, not its walls. The hearth came before the market, before the roads, before the name. You wander to the window and look out. Below, rooftops rise and fall like quiet waves. Here and there, little orange flickers mark where others are doing exactly what you're doing, lighting their flame, sitting in thought, listening to the city breathe. It's said that when the goddess Hestia left Olympus, tired of divine politics, disillusioned by endless ambrosia feasts, she came here, not to rule, just to rest, just to warm her hands like everyone else. There's no temple to her in that spot, just a bench carved from basalt and a sign that says, "Sit, speak, stay." Every year, pilgrims come from elsewhere in Greece, hoping to sit there and feel something. Most leave saying they just felt the wind, but a few claim the stone was warm, even in winter. One monk reported that the bench whispered back, "Fringe nonsense, probably, but this city has never been allergic to mystery." A knock taps at your door. It's the innkeeper's daughter, with a small basket of flatbread figs and something wrapped in olive leaves. She steps inside and, noticing your lit hearth, nods approvingly. "Good, she's with you now," she says, then disappears without further explanation. You eat quietly, tearing bread with your hands, dipping it into the soft spread within the leaves. It tastes like something between ash and honey. You don't ask for the recipe. Your flame crackles, once spits a single ember into the air, and goes quiet again. The night stretches long and velvety. Sleep nudges at your shoulders, but you stay up a bit longer, lying on your back near the fire, watching the glow paint lazy shapes on the ceiling beams. You remember the boy with the broken lamp, the old woman with the spiral of bark, the wind chimes shaped like dancing flames, the library hearth brewing unread thoughts. And you realize Hestia's Fireplace didn't just get a city named after it. It got a rhythm. It got a language. It got 1,000 tiny acts of faith repeated night after night in quiet homes like this one. And in your next breath, as your eyes begin to flutter closed, you feel it. That whisper of heat, that pulse beneath stone, that simple sacred act of something staying lit, not for glory, not for grandeur, but simply to say, I am here. I am warm. And you are not alone. By morning the coals have dimmed, but not died. A few soft embers huddled together like old friends in the ash bed. You prod them gently with a slender stick, not to rekindle the fire, but just to say, good morning. They pulse back at you, once, glow, fade, glow again, then settle down. You stretch not like a hero rising for battle, but like someone who's slept beside a wise presence and absorbed a little of its calm. Outside the city yawns awake. No bells, no announcements, just the slow lighting of fires, kettle lids clinking open, and the soft scraping of brooms on stone. Downstairs, breakfast waits porridge, sweetened with dried persimmons, and a chunk of fresh goat cheese, wrapped in a vine leaf. You eat slowly, grateful not just for the food, but for the heat that prepared it. You wonder how many stories start with a bowl of porridge. Probably not many, but maybe they should. There's no rush to leave, but curiosity tugs at you like a friendly dog. One last walk, you think. One last chance to understand why a fireplace, an ordinary soot-blackened crackling thing, was enough to give birth to a city and keep it breathing for centuries. You head toward the outskirts where the original settlement once stood. It's quiet there. Fewer tourists, no snack carts or museum guides, just dusty paths lined with thyme and chamomile and the occasional tortoise blinking in the sun like it owns the place. You come upon a low ruin, a circle of stones no taller than your knee. At its center, a round depression, still blackened from old fires. A small plaque nearby reads Hearth 0, the first one. No pedestal, no grandeur, no towering column or statue of Hestia, just a circle of fire where it all began. You sit beside it, not because you're tired, but because you're listening. The wind rustles the herbs. A bird cheeps somewhere in the olive trees. And from deep within the stones it almost feels like a heartbeat. Historians still argue whether this is truly the site of the first flame in Hestia. Some say the real one was farther east, lost beneath a basilica. Others claim it never existed at all, that it was metaphorical, a poetic invention to explain a particularly well-funded kitchen. But as you sit there, you understand something that doesn't need proving. What mattered wasn't the flame itself, it was the act of lighting it, the gathering around it, the stories told, the meals shared, the promises whispered when everyone else had gone to sleep. In this city, the hearth was never just a place to cook or warm your hands. It was a compass, a center of gravity, a way to say, this is where we begin. You reach into your satchel and pull out the little oil-soaked wick again, just the tail end of it, saved from last night. You press it into the ash, not to light it, but to leave something behind. A quiet offering, a thank you. As you stand, you feel lighter, not from sleep, but from understanding. Not everything in history is about kings and battles and dates. Some of it is soft, flickering, domestic, the sort of thing you miss if you blink. But not tonight. Tonight you noticed, and because you did, the story will burn just a little longer. Your steps home are slower now, not from exhaustion, but reverence. The city seems to sense your mood and walks with you, quieter than usual, its stones warm underfoot, like they've memorized the sunlight. Back in your room, you kneel before your own hearth, still faintly warm from the night before. The embers are gone now, tucked away into memory, but a soft gray hush lingers in the air. You don't relight it. You don't need to. Not tonight. You sit again by the window. Below the rooftops shimmer in the late afternoon light a patchwork of terracotta and smoke tendrils. The scent of lemon peel and cedarwood drifts up from somewhere nearby. A boy is singing off-key but joyful as he sweeps the steps of a bakery. A woman leans out her window to shake a rug, and the dust floats in the air like ancient pollen, settling on everything equally. You imagine for just a moment that the goddess Hestia herself is sitting beside you, not in shining robes or with heavenly fire, but in a loose linen tunic, her hands dusty from kindling. She says nothing. She doesn't need to. That's always been her way, present, not loud. The last to leave, the first to warm a stranger. It's strange to think that in a pantheon full of thunderbolts, war cries, sea monsters, and jealous siblings, the goddess of the hearth is the one who kept everything from falling apart. Not because she shouted the loudest, but because she never left, never stopped tending. You remember something now, a quote carved above the stone bench in the center of town. You hadn't noticed it the first time. Flame is not power. It is promise. You whisper it to yourself, and the syllables melt into your breath like honey into tea. Outside, someone lights a lamp. Another begins to draw their curtains. In the distance, the wind chimes stir again, this time slower, softer, almost like a lullaby. The whole city is easing into its nightly rhythm, and you are part of it now. This place named not after conquest or fear or ambition, but after a fire tended with love. A city built around a quiet center, a home for the act of staying. And now, your body knows its time. The floor beneath you has cooled, your breath has deepened, and the last of the daylight has folded into the folds of your blanket. No need to chase any final answers. The story has no twist, no ending. Just warmth, just stillness. Just the faint memory of a flame that never truly goes out. So now, with the fire's glow tucked behind your eyelids and the hush of Hestia laced gently through your thoughts, let your breath ease into rhythm. No need to hold on to anything, not the names, not the dates, not even the flickering shadows. Let them drift soft and slow, like smoke rising from a sleeping hearth. Your hands are warm. Your heartbeat is steady. And somewhere in the folds of time, a city still sleeps with its fireplaces aglow, not for glory, not for spectacle, but simply to say someone is home. Let that thought settle, like ash on cool stone. Let it quiet every room inside you. And now, drift. Drift as though your thoughts are soft embers in a midnight sky. Drift like the smoke from an ancient tree hollow, winding upward through forest silence. Drift as if the whole world is made of flickering kindness and glowing patience. You've wandered long tonight, not through battles or empires, but through the still, steady places that keep the world turning quietly beneath history's louder pages. So, rest now. The fire has been tended. The night is watching gently. And you are exactly where you need to be.